Everybody to our Professionals on Campus series. I'm just going to go over some housekeeping stuff while more of you are joining us. There's about 100 of us on the call, so for now we're expecting 100 more, so we will mute you for the duration of the presentation. The event is being recorded, so we can share it later, and we can also share it with you. Just want to mention that if you want to see the speaker, you can hover over the person's square and the 3 dots in the blue square. If you click on that and you press pin, it'll show you that person larger. I'm going to pass this now to Lori Dorff, our VP of Institutional Advancement. Welcome again.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everybody. I'm delighted to be presenting our Professionals on Campus program, which was started about 8 years ago to bring our successful alumni to meet with our students, collaborate with faculty, and talk about what it was like when they were a student, how they made some of their career choices, and the transition they went through from being a college student to where they are today. And you'll have that opportunity today. So I am pleased to be here to introduce our distinguished guest from the law firm of Vishnick McGovern Milizio. We are joined by James Burdi, who will present Adulting 101, Legal Rights, Responsibilities, and Life Preparedness for Students and Families. James is a partner at Vishnick's Wills, Trust and Estates and Elder Law Practice, concentrating in trust and estate planning and administration. He is a frequent lecturer in continuing legal education at St. John's and addresses professional and student audiences on various legal topics. Thank you for being here to discuss such an important role with our students. And I want to thank Professor Schulman for partnering with us today for this event. And now I'd like to turn it over to James Burdi. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and welcome everyone. Again, my name is James Burdi. I'm with the firm Vishnick McGovern Milizio. We're based in Lake Success. I grew up in Hollis, Queens. I got my BA in government and politics from St. John's and my law degree from St. John's. So, you know, just down the road from your school. And as Lori said, my practice right now is primarily in trusts and estates, wills, trusts, guardianships, adoptions, special needs planning. But prior to concentrating my practice in that way, I had a more general practice. So I have a background as well in criminal defense work, landlord-tenant, consumer debt, divorce, and real estate. In other words, many of the things the average person confronts in their life in the legal world. And as you'll see as we get on into this webinar, trust and estates is not just for the old and not just for the rich. There's a place for estate planning for everyone. But what's this webinar about? It's about you. Most of you are just about 18 years old, maybe 19, and this is a very critical age from the standpoint of the law. You have more rights now as an adult. You don't need parental consent for most things that you do. Excuse me if we just blacked out there. I think we're back now. But in addition to having more rights as an adult, you also have more responsibilities as an adult. And it's kind of a paradoxical age. On the one hand, many of you are still very, very dependent upon your families for financial support. Many of you may still live at home. On the other hand, you've reached a point where your thinking is independent, your conduct is independent, you're making career plans, and it's important to explore what the legal aspects of all these responsibilities are. So why would I present this? What I found in my practice is that a lot of young adults encounter problems with the legal system just because they don't have enough background to confront it correctly. They get tied up in leases or promissory notes that they didn't understand the meaning of. They have problems accessing health records. Maybe their bank accounts still have their parents' names on them. So I want to give you an overview of what you're facing in the legal world now that you're a young adult. So we'll start with the basics. The basics are the age of majority. Okay, for federal and state purposes, the age of majority is 18. Okay, I'll concentrate first on the federal. As you know, New York and the federal government both have their own bodies of law that you're subject to. Most of the time, it's New York law that you have to deal with. But again, there are some federal matters that affect you. For one thing, the voting age, as you probably know from the past month, the voting age for a presidential election is 18. At 18, all males have to register for the draft. At 18, you can be called for federal jury duty. And at 18, if you're charged with a federal crime, you can be tried as an adult. Okay, New York, there are more ages for more things. Okay, and I'm going to tick off a list of things that the age of 18 applies to. We'll come back to them in more detail after I go through the list. Voting. Voting is age 18 in New York. Litigation. Your right to sue and to be sued kicks in at 18. Okay. At 18, you can enter into binding contracts. Once you're 18 years old, your signature on a contract will bind you. Okay. Your parents no longer have the right to access your medical records or your personal records without your consent. And they no longer have the right to direct your medical care. Okay, you control your medical care, you control access to all of your records. This is a two-edged sword, though. There may come times when your parents, especially if you're on their health insurance, might need to access your medical records in order to get something paid. They can't do it without you. Okay, there are ways to work around this, which we'll go into later on in the webinar. The age to consent to marriage in the state of New York is 18. With court approval, you can also get married at 17. And this is a big change over the past few decades. When I was in law school in the 70s, a person could get married in New York as young as 14 with proper court approval. Okay, that's been completely eliminated over time. Now you must be 18 to get married on your own consent, 17 with the approval of a judge. Tattoos, lottery tickets, age 18. I know for my kids, their 18th birthday was a day to go out and get a tattoo and buy a lottery ticket. Those seem to be milestones for them. I don't know if that's still the case. There are some exceptions to the 18 rule. Admission to a casino requires that you be 21. You have to be 21 to purchase liquor in the state of New York and 21 to purchase tobacco. Firearms, there are two gradations, 21 to get a handgun permit, but 16 for rifles and shotguns. Criminal prosecution in the state of New York is a little bit of a mixed bag. If you're under 16 and you're arrested for a crime, you're not charged with a crime. You're brought into family court for a delinquency hearing. Once you're 16, if you're arrested for a crime, you are prosecuted as an adult in criminal court. However, if you're under 19, there is something called youthful offender treatment, which results in a sealed record instead of a conviction, criminal conviction, you're adjudicated a youthful offender. So again, once you're 16, you can be arrested and prosecuted as an adult. As long as you're under 19, there is this mitigation where you can get a sealed record. Another very complicated area is consent to sexual conduct. The basic rule in New York is a person under 17 is incapable of consenting to sex. But it's more complicated even than that because it depends on the relative ages of the two parties involved. The relationship between a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old is different than the relationship between a 21-year-old and a 16-year-old. And I'm not going to get into all the different areas and aspects of the statutory rape statutes, but I thought it was important to get it out there that the age of consent is 17. If you're an adult, you need to be aware of that. Okay. And by the way, there are no defenses to a statutory rape charge other than it didn't happen. Okay. The fact that you thought the other person was 18, or the other person looked like they were 18, or said they were 18, or even had a phony driver's license is not going to be a defense. I think this is something to be very, very aware of. This is something I tell a lot of high school seniors. It's possible in a high school to have a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old who are going out. That can be a very dangerous relationship. Child support goes to 21. So if you are under 21, you may be entitled to be supported by a parent. Interestingly, though, if you are a parent and you're under 21, you can be liable for child support. So you could actually have a situation where an 18-year-old is both receiving and paying child support. Finally, another age issue, the right to have an abortion in the state of New York is not subject to any age of consent. A young woman does not need her parents' consent regardless of her age in order to procure an abortion in the state of New York. But as you can see, there's this whole patchwork of ages for different activities and different responsibilities. And the reason for it is based on the legislature's assessment of a balance between protecting young adults from mistakes they may make due to a lack of maturity or a lack of experience, and at the same time holding them accountable for adult conduct. If you look at the different ages here, for example, casinos, drinking, tobacco, it's 21. There's a belief on the part of the legislature that until you reach 21, you really should not be engaging in those activities. On the other hand, the right to sue and to be sued, the right to vote, all of that's 18. Okay, those are civic duties and civic responsibilities that they want to encourage young adults to become active in. So again, you see this balancing between accountability and protection. That's the overall overview of what ages apply to what types of activities. But let's break it down a little bit. First off, and I'm going to talk a lot about this, contracts. What's a contract? Contract's an agreement between two or more parties, okay, to provide a good or a service or to perform an act in exchange for some consideration, that is something of value, okay? It's essentially an enforceable agreement between parties. There's an offer, there's an acceptance of the offer, there's consideration or value. Most contracts are in writing, okay, and signed. In order to be enforceable, most contracts need to be in writing and signed. There are exceptions. For example, agreements you enter into with a real estate broker do not have to be in writing to be enforceable by the broker. So if you're entering into any kind of a brokerage agreement for a rental, be aware of that. Contracts for less than $500 don't have to be in writing. But again, most important contracts will be in writing and will be signed. Keep in mind your signature counts. Before you sign anything, you should read it. Okay, put the pen away until you've read the agreement. I mean, there's no better advice I can give as a lawyer. This sounds pretty obvious, but we all sign things every day without reading them. Okay, when you go on the internet and you get this accept decline before you can get into a site, almost everybody just clicks accept because they want to get in. Okay, if you're in the financial aid office at the school, you may be signing documents to get a student loan or to get a grant. How many people read every word of it? At the doctor's office, you sign releases. The only way the doctor can collect insurance on your health coverage is to disclose medical records. So you'll be signing releases and authorizations. Not everybody reads them. Most people can't be bothered. If you're in the bank opening up a bank account, most people do not read the agreement that they sign. Okay, we're all guilty of this, but it's a bad habit, and certainly it's important that you read anything that's going to cost you money, anything that's going to obligate you to performance before you sign it. Because if you breach a contract, if you go back on your end of the contract, you can be sued. And you can be sued on a number of different levels. You can find that you're just losing a deposit. That's what happens frequently. If you put a deposit down on a car and then decide not to buy it, they'll keep your deposit and they'll sell the car to someone else, but you won't get your deposit back. That doesn't always happen, though. We see this with catering halls. Because of the pandemic, a lot of catering halls have refunded deposits or they've rescheduled indefinitely. But a lot of times, catering halls under normal times will say, you don't just lose your deposit, we're going to sue you for the whole package. You signed for a $40,000 event. You gave us $8,000 when you signed the contract. We can sue you for the other $32,000 because we expected to make that money. Okay, that's called damages. All right. It comes up. Like I said, with catering halls. It'll come up in leases when we talk about leases a little bit later on. Okay. Most of the time, it's just losing a deposit. Airline tickets, you lose the deposit. Hotels, sometimes you lose the deposit. But again, for the more important or bigger contracts where you can actually be sued for damages, it's very important to be aware that if you're sued, you have to respond. If you're served with a summons and a complaint, someone knocks on the door and hands you a summons, or you open your door and you find a summons has been attached to your door, or even if you just receive it in the mail, a summons and complaint needs to be addressed. If you don't address it within the time that is stated in the summons, the person suing you, the plaintiff, can get a judgment against you. A judgment, once they have it, can be enforced in a number of ways. It can be enforced by garnishing your wages. In other words, taking 10% of your paycheck every week. It can be enforced by a levy against property or an attachment of property. They can take your car, they can take your bank account. I once had a case where I sued an insurance company that ignored us, and I got a judgment against the insurance company. I gave the judgment to the sheriff. This was out in Suffolk County, and he actually walked into the insurance company and started seizing their computers. Okay, and that got their attention right away. Okay, but because they had defaulted on the judgment. It's really, really hard to open a default judgment as well. Once you've ignored that summons and the other side's gotten a judgment, in order to open it up, in order to get a judge to give you another shot, you have to prove, A, that you weren't really properly served with the papers, and B, that you would have won the case. Okay, that's a very, very hard thing to prove. So again, if you get served with a summons complaint, don't ignore it. At minimum, go to the courthouse, speak with one of the clerks. In most consumer debt situations or landlord-tenant situations, the clerk of the court will help you complete what's known as an answer. And once you have an answer filed with the court and served on the other side, no one's going to get a judgment against you until you've had your day in court, until you've had your opportunity to defend yourself. Okay. In bigger cases, you may want to retain a lawyer. If you can't afford a lawyer, at least get some advice. The Queens County Bar Association has a referral service where for a very reasonable consultation fee, you can get a consultation with a lawyer and find out just, how bad is it? What are your rights? Is it something you can defend on your own? Will you need representation? And to see if you qualify for some of the legal services that are available out there for people who can't otherwise afford legal representation. All right. The contract that many, many people in your position as a student might find themselves signing is a lease. Okay. A lease is a contract. It's a contract where the landlord promises you that you'll have the use and enjoyment of property, and you promise to pay rent you promise to keep the property in good condition, and you promise to surrender it in good condition at the end of the lease term. All right, so that obligation to pay rent survives the surrender of possession. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you sign a 24-month lease, a 2-year lease at $2,000 a month, and you leave after 11 months, you still owe the other $46,000 to the landlord, right? If the landlord never rents the place out to anyone else, he can come after you for that unpaid rent, okay? Because the lease has two aspects to it. It's the right to use property, but it's also an agreement to pay. Okay, so this becomes a big problem when roommates take an apartment together or take a house together. All right, because people come and go. People transfer out of Queens College up to Binghamton, or someone just drops out of school, leaves the neighborhood. Your obligations for rent are what is known as joint and several. By joint and several, it means that the landlord can come after all of you or any one of you for the whole thing. If 4 roommates rent a house together, they didn't each agree to pay 1/4 of the rent. They each agreed to pay all of the rent. And how it gets divided up among the 4 of them is up to them. It's of no concern to the landlord. So this is really, really important, because I know a lot of students get together, they take an apartment. My daughter did it when she was away in New Orleans at school. Fortunately, she and her roommates thought enough to bring the parents in on the negotiation, and we were able to control things pretty well. But you can get jammed up quickly. Best advice if you're going to sign a lease, choose your roommates very, very carefully, because you could find yourself paying their rent. Read the lease very carefully. Find out who's paying the utilities, who's responsible for maintaining things. Find out how the security is going to work. Be clear who the security comes back to, especially if roommates come and go. If you put up all of the security, make sure the landlord understands that it comes back to you when you surrender the property. Otherwise, the landlord will write checks to all of the roommates. Discuss with the landlord what would happen if someone moved out, whether or not you'd have the right to bring in other people. Most landlords, if they're renting to students, go along with that. As long as they're getting the rent and no one's wrecking the place, they're happy. But it's worth having a discussion in advance with the landlord. You do have a right in the state of New York to assign a lease, a residential lease, so that if you're no longer interested in renting the place, but you can bring the landlord someone acceptable to the landlord within reason, the landlord has to accept that assignment. But that assignment doesn't free you from the lease. All that assignment means is you've added someone to the lease that the landlord can now look to. So again, if you assign the lease, make sure that the person you're assigning it to is actually going to be reliable, because you're still on the hook for the rest of that lease. Okay, I can't emphasize this enough. I get a call like this at least once a year from people who have signed leases. They thought that as long as they moved out and left the place in good condition, they'd have no further obligation to the landlord. But you do. Okay. Other kinds of contracts, promissory notes. Promissory note is what it sounds like. It's a promise to pay money back to someone. It usually has a borrower, a lender, an amount, and a time to pay. Your student loan is a promissory note. Your car loan is a promissory note. Credit cards are also a form of a promissory note, because you're signing a finance agreement and you're agreeing to pay back with interest. Promises to pay are not conditional. If you take out a car loan and the car turns out to be a lemon, you're still obligated on the loan. The finance company does not want to know how much trouble you're having with the car. Okay, same thing with credit cards. There are some consumer protections with credit cards, but for the most part, once you owe that money, you owe that money. Okay, student loans, the same thing. It's no defense to a student loan that you didn't get a good job for all the money you spent on tuition. Okay, And also, there's a lot of talk about student loan forgiveness, but what goes into Congress and what comes out of Congress are often two very different things. I wouldn't count on total student loan forgiveness in any time in the near future. If you're borrowing money on student loans, only borrow what you expect and intend to pay back, all right? Because you don't know how the student loan forgiveness program is going to look by the time it gets passed by Congress and signed into law. So other types of contracts, car leases. Think about a car lease the same way you think about an apartment lease. Once you've signed it, you're obligated on it. If your lease is coming up and you turn the car back, fine. If you want to turn the car back before the lease is up, you're going to be billed for the balance of the lease minus the resale value of the car. Okay, so again, be very, very wary when you sign a car lease. Health clubs actually have to give you a few business days to cancel if you've signed a health club membership. But again, read the membership carefully, because usually they can bill you for a couple of months after you've resigned from the health club. They haven't been enforcing that lately because of the pandemic. Employment agreements are contracts. Most people do not sign employment agreements for part-time jobs or full-time jobs. But if you're dealing with anything like a trade secret or a customer list or some technology, your employer may ask you to sign something called a non-disclosure or a non-compete. Read them carefully before you sign them. I know here in our law office, we frequently bring in clerks, students who want to get some experience. We're glad to give them the experience. We're glad to share our knowledge with them. But we certainly would not want them then taking our client lists and as soon as they get admitted to practice, mailing out to all of our clients. In the legal profession, you really can't stop it, but in other professions and occupations, you can. So if you plan to branch out on your own in the same kind of business, be very careful about signing a non-disclosure or a non-compete. Do not, if you can help it, co-sign someone else's promissory note or guarantee somebody else's promissory note. When you co-sign a note, you're not just vouching for the person. You're actually promising to pay that loan. Okay, this comes up a lot. Oftentimes, a person just doesn't have the credit or doesn't have the income, but if their best friend or their brother or someone else co-signs, they can get the loan. Again, you're not just vouching, you're promising. All right, it's one thing for me to co-sign my son's car loan to get him a better interest rate. It's quite another for you to co-sign your friend's car loan. Okay, co-signing is guaranteeing, it's promising to pay. Okay, so talking a lot about contracts and lawsuits. If you had to bring a lawsuit, where would you bring it? Well, there are a number of courts in the state system, and depending on the type of lawsuit you were bringing, you would pick different courts. The one you'd be most likely to deal with is the civil court. The small claims court is in civil court. If you're suing your dry cleaner because they ruined your coat, if you're suing your auto mechanic because he didn't do a good job and the car broke down. Lawsuits up to $10,000. You don't need a lawyer. Small claims court is a quick and easy way to get your day in court. Similarly, for landlord-tenant, the New York City Civil Court has a housing part called the housing court. As I mentioned before, the clerks at housing court and civil court can be very, very helpful to someone who doesn't have a lawyer. And if you ever got served with eviction notices, I would encourage you to immediately go to the housing court and get all the help that they'll offer you. Larger cases, like car accident cases, personal injury cases, are brought in Supreme Court in the state of New York. Matters involving families, like custody, visitation, child support, they're handled in family court. And finally, the court that I deal with most of the time, surrogates court, handles the affairs of decedents and minors. Okay, I probate wills, I do adoptions, I do guardianships, all of that's done in the surrogates court. And one other quasi court you might deal with is the Traffic Violations Bureau. If you ever get a ticket in the city of New York, they're handled not in a regular court, but in a Traffic Violations Bureau. If you ever are confused about what court you need to be in, or if you get served with papers and you're confused about what to do with them, there is a website that you can go to, nycourts.gov. And nycourts.gov is a great, great resource. I use it all the time myself because it has forms, it has information. I can look up background on lawyers. I can get addresses for courts and phone numbers. So it's a very, very valuable tool. Also, the Queens County Bar, as I mentioned, and their website is qcba.org. I'll say that again, qcba.org. And they can be very helpful. Okay, I'm just going to check my time. I want to touch a little bit on taxes. Okay. Taxes are not something young people think about very much. You're not having a lot taken out, if anything, from your paycheck. But you need to know income is taxed. All income is taxed, federally and New York. That's the law. Okay, people who work off the books are maybe working under the radar, but they're also working illegally. Okay, you should be on the books if you're working. There are advantages to being on the books. For one thing, your employer is making contributions to your Social Security pension, which you will get someday when you retire. It guarantees that you're entitled to workers' compensation if you're hurt on the job. Okay, it guarantees that you're entitled to unemployment insurance if you're laid off. So there are many, many benefits to being on the books. Okay, I know that off the books feels good because you get to bring all the money home. And again, most people are under the radar on these things, but be aware of it. There's no such thing as being legally off the books. All right. Finally, I don't want to touch too much on criminal law because this is not meant to be a criminal law seminar, but it's pretty difficult to get through life nowadays without having some interaction with the police. And if you're a young person, there are a couple of things you probably ought to be aware of that will help you get through any interaction with the police as well as possible. For one thing, if you're pulled over for a traffic stop, speeding ticket, red light, when a police officer pulls you over, the police officer may or may not have already decided that you're getting the ticket. If you're respectful, cooperative, there's a chance you might talk your way out of it. There's a chance that maybe you just had a broken tail light and he's giving you a warning. If you mouth off to the cop, you're going to get a ticket. You may get more than he planned on giving you. Okay, there's no advantage to being anything but respectful and cooperative with the police officer in a traffic stop. Having said that, that doesn't mean he gets to search your car. Okay, if you're pulled over for a traffic ticket, you take your ticket, you thank the officer, you move on. If he asks if he can open the trunk of your car, there's no reason to consent. Okay, don't be intimidated by it. There's a fine line between being respectful and being overly cooperative. Again, that's traffic tickets. We all get them. If you ever find that you're being taken into custody, be very, very careful. If a police officer has decided to take you into custody, you're going to be taken into custody. You're not going to talk your way out of it. The goal at that point is to navigate it safely and smartly. Okay, there is never any advantage to resisting arrest. I don't care how much your rights are being violated. This is not a political commentary. It's not a commentary about society. It's my advice to you as a lawyer on how to get through the process. There's no advantage to resisting arrest. There's absolutely no advantage to having a conversation with a police officer once you've been taken into custody. Okay, everyone knows they have the right to remain silent. Unfortunately, most people don't seem to have the ability to remain silent. And as one of my criminal defense lawyer friends likes to say, the only reason the fish got caught is because the fish opened its mouth. Okay, you don't have to speak with the police, and I recommend that you don't speak to the police. Just immediately say, "Officer, I'd like a lawyer." That will end the conversation, and you won't get yourself in trouble. Question comes up about cell phones. You will be relieved of your cell phone if you're taken into custody, but you do not have to give your password to the police officer. Okay, that phone can stay locked until it's given back to you when you're released. Okay, I know this is a big issue for a lot of people. They will take the phone from you for a number of reasons, including your own safety, but they do not have the right to ask you for your passcode. Okay, don't volunteer it. Okay, there'll be plenty of time after you've been processed and arraigned in front of a judge and released and gone home to sit down with a lawyer and figure out if any rights have been violated, to figure out whether or not the arrest was valid, and to deal with whatever the underlying reason for the arrest was. But your goal, if you've been taken into custody, needs to be, how do I get through this as safely and smartly as possible? Okay, and to do that, again, remain respectful, remain cooperative, but don't volunteer anything. Okay, that's the best advice I can give anyone who's confronted with that situation. Okay, there's a whole system out there designed to protect you later. Okay, but it's up to you to make it from the curb out to outside of the courthouse. Okay, I think we're coming up on a break. Is that true, Lori?
Yes, if you're ready for us to take one, we're ready to take one.
Okay, sure. I have a little takeaway that I can do afterward.
Okay, so then we can now welcome President Frank Wu to the event. Frank, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you so much. What wonderful turnout. Thank you to Mr. Burdi for his presentation. Like him, I'm trained as a lawyer, and so I've been around some of this. But even if you're not going to law school, not interested in law, there's just so much that's around us that the law governs. When you go to law school, one of the things you realize in the first few days or weeks is you are just surrounded by rules and regulations at all times, whether you want to be or not, whether you notice or not. And one of the great things that happens when you have legal training is suddenly you see it all around you. But even if you don't have legal training, and even if it's the sort of thing that you want to avoid, I hope you'll see this talk as an opportunity to empower yourself, to have a sense of how these rules can help you. They're not always rules that constrain your actions. Sometimes they protect you too. They ensure that you'll get paid by your employer, that you won't face discrimination, or if you run into problems, even as an ordinary consumer, that you'll have a way to redress them. And so when I had the great opportunity to go to law school, I just loved it because I thought, wow, here's a chance to take all these words that might have seemed meaningless or obscure, and sometimes words can be hateful, but to take speech and to use it positively, whether it's in arguing or writing a legal brief or an op-ed or blog. So I hope that this has inspired you to see the power available to you. And in a season of giving thanks, I want to thank all who come and share their expertise and time with our students. So if I may ask Mr. Burdi a question, I'm sorry I wasn't able to join the talk until just now. But my question for the students, I see we have more than 150, those who have become interested in law because of what you've said, what do you suggest they do as an undergraduate to prepare themselves for a possible legal career?
There's no particular major that gets you into law school more than any other. I know a lot of people major in political science or history, figuring that that's the best way to prepare for law school. And of course, that is a great way to prepare for law school. But I would say that the best way to prepare for the LSATs and to become a good lawyer would be to work on your writing skills, work on your reasoning skills. If you can, if there's a class in rhetoric or a class in logic in the philosophy department, take those classes. Certainly, the more background you have in history and in political science and government, the better you'll understand the framework of the legal system. But lawyers ultimately are using words and are using reasoning. And I would encourage you to take classes that develop those skills. Okay, writing, speaking, reasoning, logic, and beyond that, just do as well as you can, because obviously grades make a difference. But that, for me, that's what I found was most helpful. My expository writing class was probably more important to me on the undergrad level than the constitutional law class I took in government. Okay, so I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, but I just wanted to join to say thank you, and there's so much to be learned here. So take care and stay safe out there. Bye-bye, folks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, now we'll take some questions from the chat.
Can I finish?
Of course. You want to go ahead and wrap up?
A couple of takeaways I'd like to throw in before we go to the questions. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Just again, to wrap things up, I'd like you to remember that your parents no longer have control over you. They don't have access to your records. They don't have the right to direct your care. This can become a problem if, God forbid, you became disabled, or maybe you're in Europe for a summer session or semester abroad. When they finally let us get on airplanes again to Europe. There are ways that you can restore that authority to your parents, or if not to your parents, to a sibling or some other person you trust. Okay, there is a document known as a power of attorney. A power of attorney names an agent whom you designate who can conduct business, financial, and legal affairs for you. Okay, it's a very complicated form, but it's a form that's actually available online. I don't necessarily recommend that you try to do it yourself. I've seen lawyers get it wrong, but it's not a long, drawn-out process to prepare a power of attorney. And similarly, a healthcare proxy, which is like a power of attorney only for medical care and medical records. I think it's very important that you give your parent or sibling or aunt or uncle or somebody the authority to act on your behalf in the event you're unable to make your own medical decisions. I think everyone over the age of 18 ought to be giving somebody a healthcare proxy. Okay, this is the part of estate planning that I said is not just for the rich and the old. Okay, you want to know that if you're unable to take care of things for yourself, that somebody out there can do it for you. Okay, if you need to get a hold of your birth certificate, and you can't do it yourself, that someone else can get it. If you need to access insurance information, someone else can do it for you. So those two forms are called a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. They are usually prepared by lawyers, but you can view them online, again, at nycourts.gov, or for the power of attorney, the general obligations law, or for the healthcare proxy, the public health law. New York state laws are online. They're easy to find, and you can read them for yourself and actually see the forms for yourself. The final takeaway, though, is this: put the pen away until you've read the contract thoroughly. Ask lots of questions if you don't understand a document or if you don't understand a situation you're about to enter into. Go to reliable sources. I've been giving you some websites that I trust. If you just want a general website for law, I frequently go to something called findlaw.com. It's run by Thomson Reuters, which is a legal publishing company, so it's reliable information. It won't turn you into a lawyer, but it might give you a start. Findlaw.com. I prefer these things to anything you're going to find on social media or Wikipedia. These are reliable sources. Okay. And again, just I hope all of this has been helpful. I'll now go to the questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Burdi. Our first question says, is there any advice you have for someone moving out for the first time?
Moving out, meaning like out of the family home?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, what I talked about with leases, before you enter into a lease with a landlord, make sure you know your roommates well enough and have read whatever the landlord's asking you to sign. If you're going to be completely on your own and you don't have a source of income, well, a landlord may not be willing to rent to you without that, but there are various sources of public assistance that you might get if you're completely on your own and don't have resources. It's not an area that I practice in for the most part. But again, if you were to look to the New York City websites, you'd probably find how to become eligible for food stamps, how to become eligible for rent subsidies. There's a lot that students can get if they're on their own, but are also full-time students. But again, I don't really have those resources available to me right now.
Okay. Our next question: how are the statute of limitations calculated or made up for contracts? When buying a house, you pay for a CO. What happens if you didn't know you were supposed to? Excuse me. Lost my space. What happens if you didn't know you were supposed to get that certificate permanently?
Okay. That's actually two different questions, I guess. But the first one is the statute of limitations for contracts is generally 6 years. Okay. So 6 years from when the contract's breached, not from when the contract's dated. So if you're going to sue somebody for breach of contract, you have 6 years to do it. If you don't do it within those 6 years, there's no case anymore. As far as certificates of occupancy, when you buy a house, you always want to make sure that the building department has certified that it's safe for occupancy. That's what a certificate of occupancy says, that the house has been inspected by the building department and it's safe for a particular occupancy, 1 family, 2 family, multiple dwelling. Okay. When you buy a house, usually the bank will insist on seeing one. Usually the buyer's lawyer will not close unless one's been issued. Based on that question, I'm getting the impression that somebody got a temporary certificate of occupancy and closed title with it, and now is wondering about getting the permanent certificate of occupancy. I know in Staten Island, temporary COs got issued and permanent COs didn't get issued for years in some cases. So I need to have more information about what took place to give correct advice. I'd like to think if I'm representing a buyer that I wouldn't close with a temporary certificate of occupancy unless arrangements have been made for money to be held in escrow or for some type of accountability to the seller if the seller doesn't get it. Now, if that's what's gone on here, and that's why the question about the lawsuit, you have 6 years from the closing. So.
Great, thank you. Before entering a lease, is there any way to negotiate with the landlord?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If a landlord hands you a form and says, here, it's the standard form, I'm reaching in the drawer here. I'm going to pull out my standard forms. They all say standard form. Okay. you can negotiate with the landlord. Depending on the rental market, if you've in a strong rental market, the landlord might just say, here's the lease, take it or leave it. If the landlord's anxious to get tenants in, and if you're good tenants, yeah, they'll negotiate. They'll negotiate the amount of the rent. They'll negotiate things like the right to assign or sublet. They'll negotiate who's paying the utilities. By the way, in the city of New York now, they can only demand 1 month security deposit, which is an important thing to know. But yeah, everything's negotiable till you sign. That's why I keep saying put the pen away until you're done. Okay. Once you sign, nothing's negotiable. So.
Great, thank you. Are there any books that explain New York State law in simple terms that you might recommend?
No, I can't think of any one book that's like an encyclopedia of law that you need to know. I will say that the young lawyers section of the New York State Bar Association, nysba.org, the young lawyers section has some publications that explain a lot of these things. Okay, they actually used to put out a book called Now That You've Turned 18. That was like a handbook for legal issues that young adults confront. The book's no longer available, but they do have other materials. So if you went to nysba.org and went into the young lawyers section, I think you'd be able to access a lot.
Okay, great. This next question relates to reasonable suspicion in regards to your example about the car and not opening your trunk. Somebody is curious if there's reasonable suspicion involved.
Well, if you've just been pulled over for a traffic stop, you do not have to open the trunk of your car. You do not have to allow your car to be searched. If you're being taken into custody, at that point, they can seize your car and certainly at that point search your car. Okay. Again, I'm not really a criminal law expert, so I don't want to get too deep into Fourth Amendment issues. Again, once you've been taken into custody, their ability to search your car is much greater. But reasonable suspicion is broad by design. If you've been pulled over at a traffic stop and a police officer has reasonable suspicion that there's a weapon in the car, he might have you exit the car to search for that weapon. But again, he'd have to have a reason. Reasonable suspicion implies exactly that, reason. You can't just say, I'm searching the car to make sure I'm safe. Okay, it would have to be that he got a call that there was a weapon used and the person left in a tan Buick, and you happen to be driving a tan Buick in the site. Okay, that would give them reasonable suspicion. Just search cars because they're pulling people over. Believe me, I've had people in my own family pulled over because of their appearance, and it happens. It happens. But excuse me. I may have just gone dark screen for a moment. I apologize. But you don't have to consent. That's really the thing. If you consent, you've lost all your rights. Just don't consent. If they do it anyway, the fact that you didn't consent makes it very, very easy to throw out any evidence that gets procured as a result of the illegal search. And if you don't consent and they search anyway and there was nothing there anyway and you were just being harassed, well, again, you've got the badge number, you've got the car number. You'll have plenty of time to have that cop disciplined or to bring whatever lawsuit you want to bring. While you're standing on the curb is not the time to have that argument. Simply refuse to consent. Make him or her do their job correctly. Okay, don't make their job easier. Okay.
Okay. This next question is referring to becoming a lawyer. As a lawyer, are you required to select a specialized field I want to become a lawyer and go to law school, but I am not sure what branch I would like to get into.
Okay. Unlike doctors, we're not specialists. I can't call myself a trust and estates specialist. We get licensed for general practice. All right. So you don't have to pick a specialty going into law school, and you don't even necessarily pick a specialty coming out, because we don't even use the expression. When you go into law school, most law schools have a core curriculum, the basic things that everybody needs to pass the bar exam. And then they have electives, and the electives are the things you're interested in. I find that a lot of lawyers are not practicing in the area that they thought they were going to practice in. I fully expected to be a criminal prosecutor, a career prosecutor. All right, my plan was to go to work in the Queens District Attorney's Office, become a bureau chief one day, maybe become the U.S. attorney. Life takes its turns. I found myself doing a lot of real estate law because that's the work that was coming my way. And then I transitioned from that into trust and estates. And I love the work I do, but it's nothing that I expected to do when I was going to law school. So there really aren't any specialties. You pick what you're interested in and you just get good at it. Okay, when you come out of law school, you continue to take CLEs, continuing legal education classes, to hone your skills. So when you come out of law school, you've got a general law degree, and depending on the firm you go to or what part of the government you work in, you'll start developing particular skills and taking additional classes. True experts, like in tax, for example, will actually go on and get an LLM, a Master's of Law, in a particular field. Most law professors have LLMs.
Great, thank you. There's been a lot of questions in the chat about the drinking age. Why is it different than adulthood age?
I'm sorry, why is it different from?
Than the adulthood age.
That's a good question. And just on a personal note, I happen to disagree with it. I happen to think that if a person's old enough to lead a platoon in Afghanistan, they should be old enough to have a beer. But it happened in the 80s when Mario Cuomo was governor, and there was a great deal of concern about drunk driving. And the experts concluded that raising the drinking age from 18 to 21 would drastically cut down on the amount of drunk driving. Did my screen just go dark?
No, you're good. We can see you.
Okay, good. And I think statistically it probably did work, that by raising the drinking age to 21, there are fewer 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in bars, so there are fewer 18, 19, and 20-year-olds driving after they've had a few drinks. But it was all geared towards the drunk driving business. Okay, that was the legislative purpose. Okay,
obviously copying an adult in his voice.
I'm sorry?
I think that was just some background noise.
Oh, okay. Whether or not I agree with it, like I said, I happen to personally not agree with it. When I was 18, the drinking age was 18, and I thought that was only fair since I was about to get drafted.
Thank you. What advice do you have when hiring a lawyer to represent you for something that you may have done or need?
Okay. Try to get recommendations. Don't go to the yellow pages. Don't go on the internet. Or if you do go on the internet, go to the firm's website and see what you can learn about the firm and about the people in the firm. But in the end, personal recommendations are always the best. If you're buying a house and you have friends that have bought houses, ask them about their lawyers. Okay, was the lawyer any good? Did the lawyer know to get a permanent certificate of occupancy, for example? If you need a criminal defense lawyer, go to a lawyer who does nothing but criminal defense work. Don't go to a general practitioner. I think I mentioned that I have some background in criminal defense, but I don't do it every day. I can get a client through an arraignment, but after that, I send them out to someone who does it all day long, because everything in criminal law is very nuanced, and a lot of it depends upon the relationship that that lawyer has to the court system and to the district attorney's office. There are defense lawyers that the assistant district attorneys live in fear of, and those guys can get better deals for their clients. So again, personal recommendations are always the best way to go. In the absence of a personal recommendation, check with the Bar Association, okay, Queens County Bar, Nassau County Bar, because lawyers join committees in the bar associations based on the areas they're practicing in. And the referral services at the bar associations know who the good lawyers are. Okay, they're not going to match you up to a lawyer, but they will give you some names. In the end, if none of that's available to you and you have to go on the internet, again, just ask a lot of questions. Interview the lawyer, right? A good lawyer doesn't mind answering a few questions to show that they know what they're talking about. Okay, and again, you ask me questions about reasonable suspicion, you can tell that you shouldn't hire me for the criminal case. Okay, ask me about certificates of occupancy, you know that you can hire me for real estate. Okay, so like picking any expert, I know how to pick a lawyer. I'm scared to death to pick a new doctor. Okay, and the only way I can do it is by asking other people, how's your doctor? Do you like your doctor? And then meet with the doctor and see if that's the person you want to use. Most lawyers will give a free consultation on just about anything other than estate planning.
Thank you. We'll take one last question from the chat here. What advice do you have for someone who is 18 and acquired their credit card, but has yet to find themselves a stable source of income?
So you have a credit card, but you don't have regular income. Well, the good thing about having a credit card is you're already building up good credit. And building up good credit isn't just good for getting credit, it's also good for getting a job, because potential employers will sometimes check people's credit ratings. So make sure that that credit card is paid on time. Even if it's just minimal payments, don't ever default on it. And I really think that, try not to run up debt that you're not going to be able to pay back. I mean, that sounds very basic, but we all find ourselves from time to time incurring debt that we didn't need to incur, and wishing we didn't have the problem of paying it back. I'm surprised you got a credit card without a steady source of income. But just leave the credit card in the drawer until you have a job. Okay, because if you start running up a bill and you can't pay it, you can do a lot of damage to your credit rating, which will affect renting an apartment. It can affect getting a job. It can affect a lot of things in the future.
Great, thank you. And students, if there's any questions that you may have that we didn't get to, we put Ifat's email address in the chat, so please feel free to send any ones we may have not gotten to. Thank you so much, Mr. Burdi. I'm going to pass it to Sarah to close the event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Burdi, thank you so much. On behalf of the President's Office and the Office for Institutional Advancement, we are so grateful for your time, as well as the generosity of your firm through the years, and now the opportunity to meet you and have you share your expertise. It's been incredible. I think our students could probably pick your brain all day, but we will relieve you, and we just want to extend our deep appreciation and best wishes for safe and healthy months ahead.
Thank you very much. And I just want to wish all the students the best of luck in their college careers and in their futures.